All right. So hopefully the sound is good here. We'll talk today about I use a lot of different terms for the same thing. So we're going to divide everything into two parts, right? And we'll for these two parts we'll use a lot of descriptive words, right? A little different way to describe it, but it's all the same, just different language, slightly different perspective. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we want to talk about So we're going to talk about being proactive versus reactive, being a powerful person versus being a person who just responds to whatever's going on. From the book Power versus Force by David Hawkins, you can call it operating in power versus operating in force. Okay. Also, we can say it this way. As you go through life, you either allow your current circumstances and environment to impact what you're thinking and feeling and saying and doing, or use your God given imagination and emotion to have a clear vision of the end result and to live in that end result so clearly with enough accurate corresponding emotion that much of your being thinks that's already happened. And you allow that vision to impact what you're thinking, feeling, saying, and doing. And therefore you're proactive, you're creating things, you're not responding to things. Follow me so far? And we'll go over this over and over again, right? So if you want to manifest something, there's three different areas that you can keep an eye on and quantify. Okay. Um, the first one is heart coherence. Coherence just means, alignment. Okay. Heart coherence, coherence of intention, and the quality of emotion. So heart coherence, coherence of intention, the quality of emotion. So heart coherence is very interesting because you can describe it in a lot of different ways. Um, Heart coherence, um, I would like to describe it like this. When you have low heart coherence, I'm overly focused on the problem and unaware of divine intervention and connection, right? The problem, the issue consumes me and I have to fix it. And if I'm not sure exactly how I am going to fix it, then I'm very stressed because if I don't know how exactly I'm going to fix it, it's probably going to go bad. So it's right. So heart coherence also relates a bit to heart rate variability. This number that biohackers and athletes use to measure stress. And heart rate variability is how well your nervous system handles change and things being different, right? So if I have really high heart rate variability, I handle stress well, right? And one of the main stressors for people is uncertainty and unpredictability. Okay, so if I, so changing your heart coherence has a lot to do with also changing your physiology. So if I have low heart coherence, I'm like this. If I go, you know what, divine intervention and connection can come into my life, and not even go like this. Even this act, you feel yourself wanting to take a deep breath because this physiology changes your nervous system. Why? Because your nervous system's like, oh, you don't act like there's wolves chasing us anymore. Can we relax? Yeah, chill out. It's all going to be good. Now, also, one way to say it is um, the divine inspired ideas and solutions are always in your peripheral vision, right? They're out here, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm focused. I'm being super responsible. Holy shit, right? This is not actually responsibility because it limits my field of view. So if I'm doing that, the solution to my problem in life has to land right in front of my nose, right? So people who are like this, solutions often are passing them by, but they can't see it. Oh, my doctor says blah 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 that I'm going to die in 6 months, and some like four different people offer them an option that would have actually worked, but they can never see it. Versus, you know what? Screw what the doctor tells me. I'm gonna see myself back on the beach, feeling amazing, right? And then when someone offers them something, they're like, "Oh, I never heard about that before, but I'm open." See, so that's number one. That's heart coherence, because you have to, if you want to create something extraordinary, you have to open yourself up to divine intervention, connection, things just working out for you, right? Not like the only way it's going to happen is if I personally handle it and make it so. Okay, so heart coherence, coherence of intention is just get very clear on what you want. I know, like, I know who I am, where I'm going, how I'm going to get there, right? It's like a focus. And in that, one of the very helpful things to do to raise your coherence of intention is to get very good at documenting your personal wins, right? Because you'll only operate in alignment with your identity is. Okay. So one of the best things to do is, understand that when people, when they undergo disappointments, it trashes their nervous system, freaks them out. They don't ever want it to happen again. So they go, "Oh my God, I need to make sure I don't make any more mistakes anymore." So what's not perfect yet, right? And it tends to transform their brain into a situation where they're looking at their shortcomings, their mistakes, and what might not go well, because it's an effort to keep themselves safe. Okay. But it makes you depressed. And a happy brain will solve any problem you give it like 25-30% better. Okay. So one of the best ways to rewire your brain for happiness is to take a journal, pen and paper, not write out how you're feeling. Screw that. Tell yourself, look around me, find something I'm doing well or what is good in my life. And when I write it down, it integrates with my brain. My brain thinks it happened a second time because there's something called a mirror neuron in your brain. And I slowly, over a period of 30 days, can rewire my brain for happiness and retrain it to look for the things in my life which are actually good and for the possibilities. You follow me so far? So coherence of heart coherence, coherence of intention, and then the quality of emotion. Okay. And this is an interesting one. Um, you know, if you really want to manifest something, you have to be in agreement with it. And you want a really interesting book. There's a book called The Feeling is the Secret by a guy named Neville Goddard. Neville, NevilleGoddard. You can get his Essential Collection book on Kindle quite inexpensively. In all the books in there, kind of the main one is a book called The Feeling is the Secret. The Feeling is a Secret. Now, I will say this, that I do not endorse his overall philosophy on everything. He thinks God is your imagination. Whatever. But some insights he has on manifesting stuff is freaking amazing, and the stories in there will freak you out, right? So the feeling is the secret. So the third point is to have corresponding emotions to what you want to manifest, right? If I'm like, "Oh, Mike, yeah, I can really see myself, at Double Diamond and on this particular cruise my wife and I are going to do to celebrate our new wonderful business. And I'm very grateful." You're like, "Cool. Tell your face," because they don't believe you, right? So there's no alignment between the emotions I have and what I say I believe. See what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, you don't believe it. Does that make sense? So one way to understand it is we want to create these things in our life because we think it will make us feel a certain way. When I do this, when I do that, when I can quit my job, when we have a full-time networking business and we can travel, then I will feel blah, blah, blah. Cool. Well, if you're waiting for it to happen to feel that way, just understand you are being reactive. You're not powerfully creating anything. You're hoping that something happens and then you will feel a certain way, right? If I'm very deliberately manifesting something, then my vision is so clear and the corresponding emotion to the accomplishment of that vision is so clear that I already feel most of the emotions already. Right. So when it actually happens, I don't go, oh my God. And I go from like, these emotions to ping. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying your emotions don't change when it actually shows up, but I'm saying it should be more like, oh, I feel it already, mostly because I can see it so clearly already. And then it happens. That makes sense. It's like, one of my favorite analogies on manifesting is just to say this, you need to get pregnant with what you want. I want to say pregnant, right? It's an interesting analogy because if I for example, if I talk to a friend of mine who's pregnant, okay, and she tells me, "Oh, Steve, if you're pretty decently pregnant, right? And you told me, oh, I love this baby. I love this baby." I'm like, okay, where's the baby? Let me hold the baby. There's no baby. You're like, okay, look, I got it. You can't actually hold the baby yet. But believe me, I already have a baby, and I do already love this baby. And I'm gonna stay pregnant long enough until I give birth. Then we can both hold the baby. Yay. And I will be excited when the kid actually shows up. Don't doubt me. But it won't go from like I have no emotions about the baby to I'm in love with the kid, right? It's like there's already emotions because I already know it's there. Right.
So you're in love with the baby before it's brought into reality or into this world.
Yeah. Because you feel you already have it.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though it's being made.
Yeah. So there's an interesting book by a named Dr. Paul Young-hee Cho. He's a Korean guy, and he ended up having a church in Seoul, Korea that had over 1 million members in his church. It's a crazy accomplishment. But he wrote a book called The Fourth Dimension. It's about faith. It's about manifesting, right? And he learned it. So, you start with something like this and you start on levels. Does that make sense? Like you do levels. Like he was started as a poor missionary in Korea who didn't have a bicycle. So he started believing for a bicycle and he understood what he got. He's like, okay, I understand what faith is. Faith is to believe you have it before it shows up, right? To have the corresponding emotions. So he decided that he did. And see where he would start talking about his bicycle. Right. And the kids were like, well, kids around him were like, where's your bicycle? And he's like, I'm pregnant with it. And they're like, it's crazy. He thinks he's pregnant with a bicycle. But like he was trying to describe the process, right? And then in his life, he got the bicycle and he started learning how to like, okay, this many people in my church, that many people in my church, right? And it was a stair-step process. Still, he has like, the process is the same. You just kind of level up with your confidence. You follow me so far?
Yeah. That's a big lesson from yesterday. Like,
yeah, just don't go, oh, I'm believing this. And your emotions are not alignment with it. Like, I'm just like, I'm trying to fake it to make you happy. Yes, I believe it. Yay. It's like, there's like, you got to be honest, like where you're at and start there. Okay. So again, the three things: alignment, heart coherence, coherence of intention, quality of emotion. Okay. So, I think I told you how I used that to create my coaching business. Do you guys remember that? No. Okay. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple examples. So, the coaching I do for my clients, I have been doing for quite a while, like 15 years, something like that. Been doing a good job, but it was never a full-time income, right? I did the coaching, I did some network marketing, and when the network marketing wasn't paying enough, I did whatever I had to do to feed my family, like work at restaurants, drive for Uber, whatever it took. Okay. And about 7 years ago, for some reason, I'm like, it's time to do it full time. Well, I made a clear decision. Okay, this is what I'm doing. I also realized that I was in a certain network marketing company that my heart wasn't in it. It felt like an obligation. So the business for me had it was low vibration, low energetic thing. Like you have to, you must, you should. If you don't do it, your friends will be disappointed with you because you brought up a bit, blah, blah, whatever. So I had made a decision. I was like, I'm stepping away from that business. And there were consequences, like some of my close friends were quite frustrated with me, but I couldn't move forward while also carrying this obligation. Does that make sense? So then I was like, okay, well, because I understood the concepts that I'm teaching you. And I was like, what can my vision be, right? That I can use to manifest this. And to be very clear, a vision is much different than a goal. A goal goes, oh, I want to do this by this time. Cool. A vision is, I'm walking on the beach with my new husband. For someone who's doesn't even have a husband, right? We're walking on the beach. I can tell you what his hand feels on mine. I can tell you what the weather's like, what the sand feels. I can tell you how easily it came into my life, how grateful I am, right? Does that make sense? It's like that's a vision. Okay. So I was like, what could my vision be to help me manifest this? Okay. And I thought for a bit, then I got an idea. I'm like, you know what? Most people, if you're like me, like on Sunday, you're about to start your week. You're like, I wonder what my week is like this week, right? Now, if you have appointments or different things, like if your week isn't always set, you're like, oh, I wonder what's on my schedule. You follow me? So I would, in my imagination, I decided to pretend it was Sunday night, and that as I look to see what's going on with my schedule, that I would pull up my Google Calendar on Week View, and I would notice, oh, like you see all the appointments this week, right? Oh, look at that. I'm like, oh, I was like kind of busy this week. I wonder how many appointments I have, right? And in my imagination, I start counting. 2 on Monday, 3 on Tuesday, this, 7, 8, 9, 7, 16, 8. I'm like, holy crap, that's 18 appointments this week. So at the time I was charging like about $100 an appointment. So 18, 36, 72 a month. That would go out to be, that's $7,000 a month. I'm like, I could feed my family on that. Does that make sense? I'm like, right. When you've been like having hustle for a long time, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a feeling that goes with that. Does that make sense? Certain relaxation, right? And you look at that and you go, you know what? And I don't have to work 60 hours a week to do it. You know what that means? I have a little bit of free time. I could do hobbies. I was like, I could do like, you take up jujitsu. I could like have the time and money to enjoy life, right? And I'm like, and I'm doing meaningful work for meaningful pay. And here's one of the key things. I looked at it and I was very careful to have a sense that I didn't have to struggle to make it happen. Like, oh, I worked myself to death for so long and finally it paid off. And man, but you got to keep the marketing up or else, right? Whatever. So I looked at it and I would ask myself a question that was designed to stir a certain emotion and stir a certain line of thinking. And the question was, how come it was past tense? How come it was so easy? Man, how come this was so easy? How come it was so easy? Now I'm giving my brain a question, a problem to solve, not why don't I have any clients? That's like, who gives a shit? Who cares why? How come how come it was easy to get so many clients? Now that's a great job to give your brain, right? So I would look at it and go, how come it was so easy to create this? How come it was so easy? I just spent a lot of time thinking about this and feeling it, again, feeling it, seeing it, thinking about it, asking the question over and over and over, right? So I got like 3 different ideas. I got an idea that I probably needed to improve my website. Had a website, but if I send people a link and they're like, yes, I'm going to pay you $100 and I trust you to solve some really serious problems for me, right? The website has to elicit a high level of, wow, this looks professional. Does that make sense? I'm like, I got to upgrade the website. Second thing I realized is I had done a lot of videos, but I'd never edited or done a second take on any videos. I don't have time. Boom, put the video out there, toss it out there, right? And it worked decently, okay? But I was like, what I do is enough outside the box that I need a video pretty succinct, very, very clear that explains what I do and the potential benefits of it, right? So I wrote the script out, which I never did. I got lighting, I got a backdrop, I got I really was like, we're gonna spend some money, you gotta make sure it's like that. Okay. And I did multiple takes on the video. Okay. Then I would get ideas also on I should do a course teaching what I do about this certain subject, and I should post it in these different groups, right? So in 2 months, boom, it manifested. I gave birth to that in 2 months after years of part-time. See, but I got pregnant with it, right? I could see it, I could feel it. It was already a done thing. So I'll give you a couple great examples of this. I told Mike this story yesterday, and I like watching UFC Ultimate Fighting. There's a woman years ago, her name was Miesha Tate. She wins the women's UFC championship. Joe Rogan interviews her in the ring. He's like, how's it feel being the new women's championship? She's like, oh, I'm so excited, Joe. Whatever, right? And then he has her on his podcast. And on the podcast, he goes, hey, Miesha, how did it feel? How did it feel for me to interview you after you won? She says, Joe had so clearly imagined it so many times that when it did happen, I didn't know if it was real. Oh, right. So can you see that her emotions, when she meditated on it and visualized it, were 100% in alignment with it so strongly that much of her being thinks it was a done deal. See? So a lot of times, again, I'll ask my clients, oh, so what's your vision? And they'll go, well, my goal is blah, 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 blah. Like, well, that's cool. But you should probably become pregnant with what you want to give birth to, right? Because if I say, I really want to be a diamond and Vidify, okay, the strong emotion is corresponding that I don't have it. That's the emotion, right? What happens when you chase something?
Runs away.
Usually it runs away. See, it's like, I'm gonna chase it. Okay, you better be fast because it's gonna run, right? Because you're only the energy and frequency around it is I don't have it, I really want it, but I'm frustrated and like, like that. Okay, so that's to go over a bit. You see that question, how come it was so easy, is actually really, really, really important, because the real difficult part for people is to let things be easier. Right? I've got a friend in Austin, he makes $100,000 a month. And he goes, the hardest thing for people is to realize that it can be easier than you thought. Right? Because so that's why it's like, okay, so you have it. Great. You became diamond. How did it happen? Oh, and I worked myself to death and I was super disciplined and I never gave up and I never faltered. And bam, like, okay, cool. So, to keep diamond, you will have to still move forward with the same energy and focus, not making any errors or mistakes and doing things perfectly. How's that feel? And I'm like, no. Well, that sounds freaking exhausting, doesn't it? Or can you have a sense of things came into my life? Does that make sense? It was like it flowed into my life. I was like this, and I was in line with coffee one day, and I happened to turn around and smile at the person and just kind of started a conversation. And turned out they were a hot network marketer looking for an opportunity and thought the timing was perfect and signed up, and I hardly have to help them at all, but they're killing it in the business. See? Like, oh, interesting, right? Like, I did that for Australia, right? I was like, I had a vision. I'm like, I have a vision of another leg. We're building Australia, right? And here's the thing, things can falter. I recruited these two ladies, one of them who had one time made $800,000 a year with Isogenics and was excited about it, right? And blah, blah. long story short, she wasn't interested, and my former upline of Beautify recruited her into another company that he isn't even doing it. But it's just like a mess. Does that make sense? We don't let that go. Oh no, it's not going to work. You're like, it's fine. It doesn't have to be a straight path. Refocus, right? Refocus. And this woman called me up who's I had done some coaching with her. She lives in Australia. She has network marketing experience. And she called me up. She goes, I'm interested in doing this. She goes, this keeps coming up. It's really in alignment. I really feel called to do this. And she's double ranked every month she's come in. She just had premiered last night. Boom, 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 boom. Like the team is going. And guess what? I put her under Brenda Varela, who's super grateful. And Brenda Varela is an amazing upline. I don't have to do that much work because she's on it. Does that make sense? Taking care of them, encouraging, coaching them, right? So my business is going, is it like this much more work? Yeah. It's flowing. Does that make sense? Because that was like when I think of a large business, I purposely put in that it flows. Okay. So when we talk about being proactive and powerful, being, allowing your vision to impact what you're thinking, feeling, saying, and doing, all that. Another great way to describe it, because it's all the same, but if you have different words to describe the same thing from a different direction, sometimes it's very helpful. Does that make sense? Like slightly different language for the same thing, you're like, oh, that makes sense to me, right? So another way to describe what we're talking about is effectively being in a flow state. And this is kind of the cool new lingo people like to talk about. Oh, they're in flow. Okay, cool. But I want to talk a bit about it and like very clear. One thing to realize, and this is a decent amount of clinical research out there in business, is Stephen Kotler is a guy who talks a lot about it as an author. He gets very complicated with it. He's slugged through his whole huge book. Look, there's 4 steps to flow. Okay. If you can get really clear on what these 4 steps look and feel like, and get better at going, okay, I think I'm out of flow. Where I'm out of flow, okay, here's how I get back, right? If you can do that, it's life changing. And if you ask me in the last 4 or 5 months, what did I do super consistently to really manifest something? It was like I got very clear what flow was and very clear when I was out and put myself back in. And from a place of flow, I manifested. Does that make sense? Right? So flow has a flow state is something we are all very naturally attracted to in different venues, right? Like you go to this concert and it was, oh man, everything just flowed. Why? The music was right, the crowd was right, the vibe was right. It was just like everything got together. It's like or you go to a concert and they're playing this beautiful, super complicated classical music piece. And it's over the top. That's over the top difficult, but they made it look easy. And the person who played it almost might say, it felt easy, but it wasn't an easy thing yet, but it felt easy. See, so flow is easy with extraordinary results. It's so we see sporting events. You're like, oh my God, do you see him do the basketball or kick the soccer ball? Like, you know, what do they call it? Bicycle kick into the goal. He made it look effortless. It was perfect. And the soccer player might even say, oh yeah, it was easy. Everything was flowing, right? So business can also flow, right? And research says executives who are good at being in flow, they're 400 to 500% more effective than anybody else. So probably be a good thing to like go, okay, what is this? What does it feel like? What does it look like? How do we measure it so we can get back if we're off? Okay, so the 4 steps to flow are selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, richness. Okay. So selflessness is it's an interesting thing. It's to get rid of your ego. Okay. Um, one of the interesting things about really doing well in business is you don't want your ego attached to whether you succeed or not. Why? If I have my ego attached to it, if this thing fails, it's really going to hurt my ego, my identity, my value. It's going to put shame on me, and people can't handle that, right? So if my ego is involved with it, it's going to be very difficult for me to take any feedback on whether or not what I'm doing is working or not. That makes sense. Like if people's ego is involved, and you're like, dude, you're doing that wrong. It's like, no, what are you doing? You should have done. Does that make sense? You feel them get very defensive, right? You've probably worked in jobs and businesses where it was a slightly toxic environment because you couldn't point out what was going on because people just get angry at you, right? Then you just keep your mouth shut and you're like, you people are screwed. I'll collect a paycheck as long as I can, but you're going under and I'm just not going to say anything, right? It's a toxic environment because the boss has a huge ego and he can't handle any evidence that what he's doing isn't working or that he's not a smart, successful guy. Right? Because so here's a slightly different angle to go about it so that if we're talking about operating in force versus power, okay, this document, the map of consciousness, right? And there's two different ways you can go through life. Now we talked about proactive, reactive. You can talk about force or power, right? And the reason we bring up this when we talk about the ego, because when you operate in force in life, you push on things, but life pushes back. And you get something done, but it requires a lot of energy. Okay. And there's often collateral damage, right? Yay, I'm worth $500 million. How are your kids doing? Well, 3 of the 4 kids are in rehab, and I'm on my 4th marriage, and I drink too much. Like, yay for you. But you worked yourself to death to be worth $400 million, right? It's force. It makes sense. Right. So when you operate in force, the main thing to understand about it is where your value comes from, where your identity is established on. So if I'm operating in force, my value and my identity come from potentially 3 different areas, which would be how am I personally performing? How are other people treating me? How are institutions honoring me? How am I performing? How are people treating me? How are institutions honoring me? Right. And the problem with that is there's never any peace there. Why? Because you don't have no idea how you're going to perform today, or maybe your boss is going to be pissed at you because he's having a bad day, or holy crap, their company's not doing well, they're going to lay you off, or whatever. Your cultish church decides that you're not moral enough and they're going to kick you out, and now you have no more connection and community, or whatever, or your dad has put shame on you because you didn't get straight A's or something, whatever. It's like there's a lot of stress. That makes sense. You understand our value and our identity can be especially vulnerable when you're dealing with community and connections. So what do I mean by that? We're naturally wired that we need community to survive. Okay. And a great example is if you look at, for example, cults. Um, cults first step is they're like, oh, we're gonna hang out and have fun together, and we're gonna do this, and we're a community, and we're together, and we're family, and we love each other. Like this is amazing. By the way, though, you have to stay in this community. You like the community, right? You're like, I love it. Cool. Well, you're gonna have to believe these things and do these 3 things. And you're like, okay, a little weird, but I can do that. Why? Because you don't want to risk losing community. And if you're not behaving right, you're like, look, either you change what you're doing or else you're out. Now, at a nervous system level, you're free. Why? Because you get out of the community and the saber-tooth tigers in the bushes eat you because you're vulnerable. So this is why you can look at organizations and communities and you're like, in the world does this intelligent person ever believe that or do that? Or why would they behave that way? They're avoiding shame, right? They have to keep the connection. Okay, so it can be very foundational, right? When you can operate in power, okay, we talk, power is another word for flow. It's another word for being proactive. It's another word for allowing your vision to impact what you're thinking, feeling, saying, and doing, right? So one of the main things with flow is that you can live a wholehearted life. You can take risks, you can fail, you can back up and do again. And the reason you can live a wholehearted life is because however you measure your value is secure. Okay, so for me, what works best for me is that I believe God loves me unconditionally, right? And when I say unconditionally, it means no matter what I do or don't do today, it doesn't change, right? And because of that, because I go, okay, God's opinion of me is more important than your opinion or the job's opinion, or like nothing else gets to tell me what I'm worth. God tells me what I'm worth, right? So I can be very secure and allows you to be wholehearted. So what does that mean? It means like, I'm going to go for it. No, you'll still fail. Don't get me wrong. And failure still hurts, but failure can't put shame on you anymore or tell you what you're worth.
Sorry, what did you say you measure your value against? Or not?
For me personally,
Or
so
just what the concept was.
so either your value comes from your personal performance, how people treat you, how institutions honor you, or some way in which you get your value on a way that's secure and stable and unchanging. Now, for me, that's like God loves me unconditionally. Okay. Not based on what I do or don't do. You follow me? So, side note, often in general, most people, most organizations don't have very good leadership skills. As a result, they have to revert to guilt and shame, controlling and manipulating. Right. So that's the same for a business as it is for a church, right? So you're like, oh, God is blah blah blah. Well, understand that often the negative aspects we have of church is just a result of the people in the church not understanding unconditional love and how to operate an organization through that. So they got to revert to your skirt is too short, you're going to hell, or some stupid crap like that, right? And if you don't control your behavior, like we have to maintain organizational cohesion by guilt and shame.
So, got a question. So, if somebody's religious or into God, etc., and they can go, okay, so God loves me no matter what. For the people that are not believers in God, what do they use as an equivalent that would give them that secure level of value?
That's a good question. Like, I haven't seen anything work as well as that, but clearly, if don't believe in God, you're gonna have to find something different. So I'll give you a slightly different example, okay? But it's not quite as secure. If you're like, because we can separate values and rules, right? So we're gonna have a little bit of conversation about that. What do I mean by that? You're like, I'm like, hey Adam, so I mean Mike, whatever, what's your value? And you guys go, oh, my value is love. This is my value that drives and focuses everything in life. I'm like, cool. What is the rule that you're hitting this? You're like, well, everyone has to be nice to me. No one can disagree with me. I'm like, okay, you're screwed. Because you can't control that. Does that make sense? Right? But if you're like, oh, my value is love, I'm like, okay, cool. How do you know you're hitting that? You're like, if I love other people, then I feel like I have fulfilled that. Awesome. Well, then you're more in control of that now. That makes sense, right? that still does leave you a bit vulnerable to you beating yourself up for not loving people as much as you should. So there's still an issue there, which is not quite as secure as just unconditional love, because that's just the way it is. Okay. So, but you got to figure out, you got to be clear on where you get your value, because that is probably the most important question, period. And the stunning vast majority of people have made up the rule for where they get their value in an accidental, unconscious way that's not empowering them. Right. And mostly it's like, oh, how do I know what I'm worth? Well, how am I performing? What do people think about me? Did I get in the right college? Did I get the right promotion at work? That tells me what I'm worth. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Does that make sense? Because you can never relax, because you never know.
Yeah, because they're all external influences. So what kind of things can somebody look at that's an internal value that isn't externally validated?
Yeah. So again, you have to decide, okay, am I just, because I'm alive, valuable?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that can be quite helpful is this. There's a company, an organization called Clifton Strength Finders. Clifton Strength Finders, and it's a kind of a personality test. Is the genesis of it is quite interesting. What happened is that this school district, they gave all their students um, uh, a test to see how fast they were reading. Okay. And some of the students were pretty slow, and some were actually pretty fast readers, right? So the school district goes, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give all the students a speed reading course, because we really need to help these kids down here, right? So they gave them all speed reading course, and these kids improved a little bit. The kids who were already good went poof through the roof, right? And so the test, what it does is it looks for your top 10 strengths and your weaknesses, right? And the way in which your top strengths, the order in which things come together, it creates this unique makeup, and it allows you, if you can figure out what this unique makeup is, then you could figure out that you are personally uniquely gifted to be world class at something if you developed it.
I
Right.
think I've done this. The Strength Finder quiz
Yeah.
thing. So it tells you 2 strengths, doesn't it? I think.
Top 2 or top 5 or top 10, something like that. So one of the things to understand from that test is that often what people do is they look at what they're not really very good at, and they go, oh, I'm not very good at that, so I got to put resources into proving that.
Yeah, make that better.
But you see, you don't get a return on investment
Yeah.
putting resources into fixing what you're naturally gifted to suck at. Maybe put that aside and go, maybe I'll hire someone to do that for me. I'm going to take what I'm actually good at and pour my life into it, and then go ping, world class. You follow me? So one thing that might be useful is if you have a core belief that simply the way you were wired from birth, from your environment, whatever, the way you are currently wired right now makes you absolutely world class at something, and no one can take that away from you. And how well you're performing can't take that away from you, and people's opinions can't take that away from you. And that's just who you are. That makes sense. You have this fundamental world class potential that is unchanging. Does that help?
To develop this belief, how to actually believe this is true,
What's that?
how to actually believe.
How do you actually believe that that's true?
What you just said.
Well, one thing you have to do is you have to get good at training your brain to look for evidence of it, versus most people look for evidence that it's not true. Right? Like, take freshmen at Harvard, right? Imagine you've been working super hard your whole life, Adam, and you get into Harvard. Sweet. Are you happy about this?
Yeah,
Why would you be happy about this?
because I have achieved my life goal.
Yeah. Is it going to benefit you in the future?
most likely,
How come?
as long as I stick to
As
the
long as you
course,
graduate,
graduate.
you'd be like, by the way, you graduated from Harvard. They're like, cool, you're hired. Right? Does that make sense? It was like, it's pretty epic, right? You know what freshmen at Harvard have a problem with? Major problem. Depression. Like, I'm super depressed. I'm like, hey, freshman at Harvard. I'm like, dude, what's the problem here? Like, oh man, I can't seem to get straight A's anymore. I'm like, who gives a shit? You're at Harvard. Like, no one's gonna ask you your grades. Yeah, but I'm not top of my class anymore. I'm really used to just, I can't seem to get this one thing perfect. These other people are smarter than me. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, why are you focusing on that? Does that make sense? So, what most people tend to do, especially if they're like hardcore, right? They don't know the skill set of being happy because they don't know how to look for and document and celebrate the wins in their life. So it's like, hey, here's another way to describe it. Most people, what they do is they set a goal and they take some action towards that goal. The problem is then they measure where they are versus their ideal end result. And it looks a long ways off, produces negative self-talk, low self-esteem, and procrastination. Versus you set the goal, you take some action towards the goal, and then you celebrate it, where you've come from, not where you're going to, but where you've come from. And you allow that to, then it produces positive self-talk, higher self-esteem, and more action, right? So it's like, how passionate can you be about looking for all the subtle things that you're doing well at? Sometimes you have to start really slow, like to-do list, brush my teeth, take a shower, get my ass out of bed, right? You have to go check, check. See what I mean? And some people are in a bad place and they gotta like, okay, we'll just start with the basics, right? A great example of this is ABC television station in the US had this show called Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition, right? They're working with Bob. Bob's got 200 pounds to lose. Okay. And so the coaches are like, hey, Bob, here's what we want you to do today. All we want you to do this week is drink 1 quart of water more per day than you normally do. And Bob laughs at this goal because, of course, he can do that. Seriously, give me a challenge. He's like, well, it's not going to help me lose 200 pounds. They're like, don't worry about that. Set the goal, hit it, celebrate it. Why? You see, Bob didn't get 200 pounds overweight by keeping commitments to himself. Bob has very low self-esteem deposits, personal integrity deposits, right? Most of the time when he goes to do something, the internal BS alarm goes off. Liar, 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 liar. Does that make sense? Right? So Bob has to take steps to increase the deposits in his personal integrity account. Right? So, okay. Hey, look at that. I did what I said I was going to do this week. Step it up. I did what I said I was going to do this week. Step it up. Does that make sense? So especially if you've been meaning to work on your business, but you haven't been, it's like, okay, step number 1 is not to grow your business. Step number 1 is to put deposits in your personal integrity account, that you actually do what you say you're going to do. And sometimes you may need to set it so low that it's laughable. Okay, I'm going to call 1 person this week. You understand you can't build a business calling 1 person a week, but you can call 1 person a week and say you did what you said you were going to do and start notching it up because you start putting deposits in your personal integrity account. That makes sense. And again, writing it, see if I not only do that, but when I write it down, the reason there's so much clinical research behind writing down 5 things I'm doing well, 5 things are going good in my life. The reason there's so much clinical research behind that is because there's something in your brain called a mirror neuron. And a mirror neuron, when you write something down, again, not digitally, pen and paper, because it integrates with your brain that way. So when that happens, the mirror neuron in your brain thinks you did it again. So when I write down, I called somebody this week, your brain thinks you did it twice. I hit a new rank, your brain thinks you did it twice. I actually went to the gym twice. Good job, right? That's amazing. So it's how to rewire your brain. There's a interesting book years ago, and I don't think the woman who wrote it understood the science behind what she did, but this is what happened. Her name was Anne Voskamp. She lived in Alberta, Canada, and she and her husband had a dairy farm. And beautiful life, dairy farm, kids, it's great. Well, one day the milk truck came to pick up her milk, but ran over and killed their 6-year-old son. I mean, talk about brutal. The loss of your child, a young child, is freaking epic. And it dumped her into a dark place of depression, and she started having a lot of health issues as a result too. And one day, a friend of hers came up to her and said, "Anne, you should write out 1,000 gifts." She's like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Write out 1,000 things you're grateful for, pen and paper." That's like a part-time job. Does that make sense? I'm like, indoor plumbing, yay! I've got a full head of hair, amazing, right? Like, I can breathe, I can whatever. It's like thing after thing after thing after. You just gotta keep going, gotta keep going, gotta keep going, you understand. Like, in a period of time, you have retrained your brain on what to look for and celebrate, and it's pretty happy with you in life because there's massive amounts of evidence, right? So that's really the best way to do that, is just document it, write it out, right? So, any questions so far? Now you've got the fire hose of information.
Have we covered all 4 over the
No,
whole state, or are we still in selflessness?
we're still in selflessness. Yes, so we'll go back to that. So selflessness is here's another way to talk about selflessness and the ego. Say I'm total alcoholic, but I want to beat the alcohol. Okay. The problem is the alcohol will trash talk you. What do I mean? Oh, you're gonna try and quit? How many times have you tried? Like 20? Every time you fail, Mike. Go ahead, try. You're gonna fail. I'm gonna embarrass you. I'm gonna take everything that's important to you. You can lose your girlfriend, your job, blah blah blah. See, I'm like trash talking you. Why? Because his value and your identity are dependent on how well he's performing, if he can do it or not, what people think of him, how institutions honor him, right? So he's vulnerable to me, and because I get to tell him what he's worth, I own him. See the problem? Now he will want to beat alcohol and he will try, but he'll never do it from a place of wholeheartedness and power. Yeah. Because he's failed before, and the potential he's going to fail again. There's the threat, and it's dangerous. You see. But if you can let go of your ego, and you don't attach your ego to whether you can do something, either beat alcohol, build a business, get in shape, whatever, then I can be more wholehearted. And when alcohol trash talks me, like, "Oh, you're not going to do it," I'm like, "Look, here's the deal. If I try and quit drinking every day the rest of my life, and I fail each and every time, you still don't get to tell me what I'm worth." See the difference? Now I'm in charge, right? So when we talk about selflessness, it's like, what does it feel? Does it feel stressful that you might not do well, or that it might not work out, or that, does that make sense? It's like, or are you wholehearted? You're like, "Man, just go for it." What happens if it doesn't work out? We'll try it again. See?
Question. Why is it called selflessness? Because being selfless means like doing things for other people. So struggling.
Because it's not about me.
Right.
Like, it's not about myself. Oh, what about me? What if I don't do it well? Blah 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 blah. It's like, oh, who cares about that? I'm not concerned about. I'm not protecting myself.
It's not about.
I'm not vulnerable.
It's not necessarily about doing it for other people. It's just you're not doing it for you per se, or put in any.
Your focus isn't this way. It's this way.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
Right. Right. So the selflessness is like, you just look around, like, okay, How well do I take feedback on that I'm not doing it right? Am I stressed about what other people think about me? Right? Am I, do I think about, oh, what if it doesn't work out and how embarrassing it will be? Right? See all this?
Yeah, so all that impacts you internally.
It's like, why are you stressed about it? Because all that stuff gets to tell me what I'm worth. See, here's the thing to understand more about the ego too is like, why do people like have road rage and get out of their cars, beat each other up and shoot each other, whatever, because you cut me off. Oh, you cut me off. You told me I wasn't worth anything. You told me I'm not worth respect. And I must have respect. I must have value. And you're threatening that value. So I will do anything to fix this. Right? It's like, I don't know if you ever heard like, oh, someone's drowning. Let's hop in the pool and save them. I'm like, be careful. A drowning person will drown you to save themselves. So people, this is why people who have rage issues, what's going on, their value is so vulnerable to what people are doing or not doing. It's like, oh, they feel you disrespected them. Essentially, they're drowning in the swimming pool. They take extreme action to fix it. They're not even thinking straight. Does that make sense? Right? But they're so desperate to get their value secure that they splashing about, beating people up, like ruining relationships, crashing their car into people, whatever, just crazy stuff, because it's the ego, right? So selflessness. The next thing is timelessness. That's a very interesting thing. It's like, oh, do I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have to, I must, I should, I have to, I must, I should. About this, like you wake up and you're like, so what's demanding that I pay attention to it? Oh, now you better worry about that. You better this. What about your kid? And oh, how's your mom doing? Oh, when's the last time you talked to her? Right? It's like, what are you gonna do so you can hold her? It's like, have you called her? Oh, what's your plan? Like, that makes sense. I'm all of the things in my life are in charge of me, right? So you guys don't have small kids, but here's the insight. When the kid's like 2 or 3, right? Here's the deal. Everything will be a crisis for them. Daddy, 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 this, we have to do that. And if I allow the 3-year-old to dictate what I'm doing all day, that's a bad thing. Does that make sense? No, it's to me. I can have this. I need this. It's like if I allow the thing to put time pressure on me, it's like I can't be a powerful person. All I'm doing is react, 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 react. Does that make sense?
Oh, I missed the beginning. Sorry, I'm not getting on.
Timelessness.
Timelessness is where.
So when I'll give you an example. Sometimes if I'm like, man, the timelessness is off. Sometimes I'll have to imagine all the things in my life which are trying to be in charge. Oh, what about my son? What's he doing? He needs a job. Is he gonna do his career going? Blah blah blah. Or my wife, my mom, my dad has a certain health condition. I probably should fix that for him. Like, does that make sense? It's like, but I'm reacting to these other things because they're demanding my attention.
So that's it. What's the definition of timelessness? That's the
Timelessness says, okay, you're non-charge, you're non-charge, you're non-charge, you're non-charge. I will get to you on my own time when I feel it's appropriate. But you don't get to dictate my schedule for the day because I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to take time out right now to do some meditating. Oh, I can't do it. I got stuff to do. I never seem to have time for blah blah blah. No, you're never proactive. You're just reacting to every single thing that wants to dictate your day. Right.
So it's being in charge of the events that happen in your life,
like
your life.
The night before I go,
Reacting to it.
what am I doing tomorrow? At what time? boom, it's laid out. I do recruiting this time. I'm going to work out here, right? Well, and this is something that like I what I have to do is I have to like I can I have so much going on. I can react all day long, right? So I have to put certain things in. Like at this time, alarm goes off, and no matter what, I'm going to get my cold line and then work out, right? Different things like that, or meditate. Because if I don't do that, I lose the timelessness.
So timelessness is the concept of having things to do, but they'll get done when they get done.
They'll get done when you decide you want to work on, not because they're putting pressure on you.
So, I mean, coming from the corporate world, that's not a luxury we have. So we get trained to be in the reactive mode of, okay, you gotta get this done by this time. So that's the opposite of timelessness, right?
True, but here's the thing. What if, sure, you have schedule and time rhymes, cool. But what first, if you took a step back and put some meditation music on and took 5 minutes, and you did that first, does that make sense? Oh, I got to do this first. Oh, really? You can't take 5 minutes to first meditate and get an idea on how to do this more effectively, right? I heard a story like this guy walks into his boss's office. And he's complaining about Bob. Bob is like at the same level, whatever employee he is. And he's look, man. He goes, I walk past Bob's office all the time. I walk past his office. He's got his feet up on the desk. It looks like he's napping. And like, does this guy ever actually work? And his boss is like, you do not bother that guy. Like in his meditation time, he comes up with ideas that save us $30 million. Okay. See, so Bob is good at the timelessness. He's not under the pressure. I have to, I should, I should. It's like, I know. It's not that I'm not gonna hit the time deadline, right? But maybe first I go, okay, to do that effectively, I can't be react, stressed. I gotta be okay. Just gonna meditate, gonna relax, gonna visualize the end result. I'm gonna ask myself, how come it was so easy for me to solve this problem? Because it's hard to do because your initial reaction is, okay, enough meditating, get back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I've got all this to do. I've got half the time I need for it. Go.
Yeah. Oh, so you need to be more effective. Are people in flow? How much more effective are they? 400 or 500% more effective. Yeah, well, that sounds like your solution, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if you're coming from a place of selflessness and then you use this timelessness thing, where it's right, okay, I'm not quite sure I'm clear on the definition, but it's something along the lines of, all right, there's enough time to get this done. I'm not going to react to it. I'm going to just work on it and we'll take some time to think about how best to do it. And like
Right.
close to this.
Yeah, so it's a way to establish that you're actually in charge of your life. Otherwise, how's your life gone? Oh, this tells me what to do, that tells me what to do, my schedule tells me what to do, so I just spend all day obeying. Versus, I like dogs. Does that make sense? And my daughter has an Australian Shepherd. Wonderful dog, but they're very strong-willed and super smart. And before him, I had a dog who is half pit bull, half Dogo Argentino, a little bit of Catahoula. The dog, his head was massive. He weighed like 90 pounds, but he was like solid iron, right? For both of these dogs, I had to, there's a training technique called NILF, nothing in life free, which means that anything the dog wants, he has to obey and earn it. What does that mean? It's like, oh, he's like, oh, pet me. Like, no, I can't. Like, oh, you want me to pet you and do it? Like, oh, now who's in charge? The freaking dog is in charge. Does that make sense? Oh, I want to go outside. Right. So, for example, from the Australian Shepherd, I'll walk up to the door and he'll be like, yeah, let's go outside. He'll try and get in front of me like every single time because he's like a herding dog. And literally, I'll just do this. I'll go step out and I'll stand at the door. like this. And I'll look at him like this. She's like, right? Why? Because I'm establishing you, Homely, you're not in charge. Nothing happens on your schedule. Your very existence, everything in your life is dictated by my good pleasure. You see what I mean? Right? Oh, he's like, feed me, feed me, feed me. I'm like, cool. There's your bowl with food in it. You can't touch it. You gotta sit and you gotta wait until I tell you. Does that make sense? You know, it's like people with these little vicious dogs, and the dog is in charge. Why? 'Cause they're always running their whole life around the dog. Oh, they need this, they need that. You can't do this, you can't do that. And the dog's like, oh my God, you're not in charge. I guess I better be in charge.
The business equivalent is like your schedule in project task line, deadlines, tasks that need doing or in charge. And, yeah, how can I want to do them? What?
Correct. And it's not like you have to take days off, but it's like, I stand at the door 5 seconds, maybe. That makes sense. It's just an energy shift. And the dog feels it. He's like, why we're not going through? He's like, oh, that's right, you're in charge. I forgot. Again, sorry. Yeah. Often does he forget? Every single time. For a smart dog, he's the dog is like super smart. But he tends to want to be in charge. So how often do I have to assert my control? Every freaking time. No exceptions.
How do you do that?
What's that?
How do you do that?
For the dog?
Yeah,
Firstly, it's an energy. Does that make sense?
no. So what
I don't
energy?
I don't react. It's like,
Okay.
I'll tell you, here's a weird resource, but it's super helpful to understand this concept. There's a TV show in America called Caesar Milan Dog Whisperer,
Yeah, I got that.
right? And it's very interesting. He goes, I train people, I rehabilitate dogs. He doesn't say I train the dogs. He goes, I train the owners. Why? Because the owners aren't calm and confident, right? One of the things you can look for in your life, Mike, is to start noticing certain words that you say out loud or to yourself, where it's like, I have to, I must, I should, have to, must, should, have to, must, should, have to, must, should. Well, it's all like debt, obligation, shame if you don't do it. I have to, I must, I should. I get to, I choose to. See, it's different. But like, for example, on the TV show, the owner will be like, my dog, he pulls all over the place. I can hardly walk him. He's a maniac, right? And Caesar will take the dog's leash and hold the leash, and the dog behaves differently instantly because he has calm, confident energy, right? He's not stressed. He's not like, oh, the dog doesn't behave. I'm embarrassed. Makes sense? Oh, what's he gonna do? Like, do exactly what I tell him to do. That's what he's gonna do. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So when I had that very large dog, and he's like, we're talking about a dog that, if not trained properly, is dangerous. You know what I mean? I ended up rehoming him to a friend in Georgia, and he finished out his days hog hunting. So you're talking about a dog who could take on a 250-pound wild boar, knock him to the ground, and grab a hold of him, and the boar couldn't get away. At 90 pounds, you're talking about like a serious animal, And I knew when I got him as a puppy, and I knew that right from the get-go that we would have to establish pack order before he got big. Does that make sense? So I bring him home. I actually swing by the grocery store and I get some split pig's feet, right? And I take him outside. I give it to him. He's over the top excited about this. This tastes amazing. And and I start petting him while he's eating, right? And I could feel him stress, and I petted him until he growled at me, and I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. I made him lie on his side till all the tension left his body. And he just, because he can't do anything, he just finally relaxed. I let him back up. He gets all excited. I start petting him. He starts tensing up to the grass. Like, did that 1, 2, 3 times. The 4th time I start petting him, he's like, whatever, you're in charge. And from that day on, like, he could eat raw meat out of the same bowl as my other pit bull makes. Their noses touching, and no one had any issue. Any one of my small children could have taken his food away. My daughter, was really an animal whisperer. As a young girl, she could tell him what to do, and he would obey her instantly. Does that make sense? I mean, he could literally eat that girl effortlessly, but she was in charge.
How did that happen?
How did what happen?
How did she get charge of the dog? Was it because you had already established?
She had that. She naturally had the sense of, I'm in charge. You don't get to be in charge. Does that make sense? So it's an attitude, it's an energy that you come into a situation with, which changes everything.
And the less
And you reestablish it over and over and over again by like nothing is life is free. Oh, I am in charge of the food. You want food? You'll obey me. Does that make sense? Oh, you want to go out? I'm in charge of the doorknob. Like everything you want in life, I give it to you. So it's like, in terms of being timelessness, it's something you have to establish over, because it's not our normal reaction is to get up and go, okay, who's in charge of me today? What crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis? I have to, I must, I should, I have to, I must, I should, and you're going all day long. You never take a break because, well, you're not in charge. You're not allowed to take a break because you don't own your own life.
On this point, so when there was pandemic and there was this whole chaos, and let's say both me and Mike were stressed out of our eyeballs, and our whole life was watching YouTube videos of like, oh, look at this, this is the scam, this is what's happening, whatever, and just make ourselves very wound up. And basically our whole life became this.
Sure.
I could feel this like frustration, and I felt like this energy doesn't belong to me.
Yeah.
But it was so hard to notice. And
It feels like, oh, I'm doing the smart thing to survive.
yeah,
I have to, I must, I should.
yeah, I need to watch this
Now.
video to, know about what is happening in the world, so I can be in charge of my future and maybe run away from, fucking tyrants who try to jab me against my will or whatever.
Sure. So I'll give you a good example. Growing timelessness and flow exactly with that, right? So when the pandemic hit, I was living in Austin, Texas, and most of my income was from coaching.
Yeah.
So the pandemic hit, and my coaching like flatline. No one was scheduling. I was like, holy shit. Everything is crisis. Like, I'm like, what am I going to do? I have to, I must, I should do something quick. Do I need to start like driving for Uber again? Do I need to do this? Do I need like, does that make sense? I was like in crisis mode. And then I realized I caught myself that I was being reactive, that I wasn't being selfless this timeless. I wasn't in flow at all. And I caught it. I'm like, I will not participate in this. What do I mean? It's like anytime there's a crisis makes money move, makes the economy change. And when there's change, there's opportunity. If you have the right mindset, does that make sense? Like during the Great Depression in America, there are plenty of people who became really, 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 really rich. See? So I'm like, but if I go like this, I can't see it. I can be like this. Oh, everyone's freaked out, but man, I bet you could do that. Does that make sense? Like, oh, everyone's freaked out. Who makes N95 masks? I think maybe I'm gonna buy stock in that company like today. See what I mean?
Makes sense, yeah. That's what politicians did. Because like, oh yeah, we are so removed of this. Like we know that the scare tactic is a bullshit. So like we are removed from this. So so what's happening? What can I make out of this situation? Oh, buy PPE. Of course.
Exactly. So I remember timelessness. What I have to do, I meditate best either going for walks or taking baths or something like that. So what I do, I start going for walks. I would listen to certain binaural audio. This had abundance, so put me in the right states, and I would go for walks, and I would just literally command opportunity to come to me. Does that make sense? Just like very deliberately meditate that something was coming into my life just because there's abundance. That makes sense. So I had to be in alignment with abundance, not with pandemic, right? Not too long after that, a friend of mine messaged me on Facebook about Healy. It's like German network marketing company, German microcurrent quantum device. It was just about to open in the US. And I looked at that and I'm like, that's super cool device. I think I could sell it. And I think a lot of my friends would be interested in that. And in 2020, I sold more of those than any single person in the entire world. And I worked half as much and made twice as much money. How was the pandemic for you, Steve? Last 2 years? Freaking amazing, man. It's like best years of my life, practically. Everyone's else stressed and they're losing their job and they're blah blah. I'm like, not me. I just said I wasn't going to participate. See?
So how did you not let the external circumstances, external pressures, because they were everywhere. Well,
Sure.
whatever angle you would go, you will hear about it, you will be impacted to some degree. How did you
So, well, managing your emotions, the first step is to change your physical body. Right. So to recognize that I need to change my emotions, but the best way to change it is really not beat myself up that I was experiencing negative emotions. Set that aside and go, well, how can I change my physical body? Because you know the quality of your physical state determines the quality of your life. Right. And if I do this very long, my physical body is going to produce biochemistry to support anxiety. So if I feel the emotion of anxiety and then I might allow my physical body to go, oh my God, I think I might be getting a panic attack. What if I get a panic attack? I mean, you'd be so embarrassed. I'm like, oh, you're screwed. Does that make sense?
And the thing Stephen said a minute ago is he chose not to participate in the panic of the pandemic. And recently I've been re-participating after not participating in all of the current affairs that are happening with all the things that we
Yeah.
know about.
Yeah.
Like central bank digital currency and 15-minute cities. I started re-engaging with it. And within weeks I felt awful. And then more recently I've gone, oh yeah, I'm doing that again. Let's not get involved.
Yes.
Let's focus on my business. Let's do something productive because looking at the videos is just making my life stressful. And
Yeah.
like you say, putting yourself in that maybe not physical position, but psychological position, which is causing you to tense up,
Yeah.
feel anxiety, feel miserable, feel panicked and stressed. And more recently, am I right? Just ignore it and
Yeah.
get on with something else.
That's true what you're saying, and often people say, don't stress out about things that you don't have, which are outside of your area of influence.
Yes.
But then again, at the same time, isn't kind of, I know, swallowing a blue pill. You just don't want to know about it. You just ignore it.
No. So
Pretend
I'm
it
not
doesn't
talking about
happen.
ignoring. Here's maybe a different way to say it. Like, what sports do you like?
Boxing, football, martial arts,
Um. So for example,
soccer for you.
soccer. Yeah. I was seeing a soccer ball, not a football. Don't worry. When I kick the soccer ball, do I look at where I want the ball to go or where I don't want the ball to go?
where I want.
where I want the ball to go. As you're driving down the road, are you like, holy crap, there's a lot of big trees here. Like, I hope I don't hit any of these trees. Like, okay, cool, trees. Where are we going? You know, like I'm driving in a blinding snowstorm and there's bright lights coming towards me. I don't go, oh my God, bright lights. I'm like, the road, stay on the road. That makes sense. So, because it has a lot to do with the questions you ask yourself, right? Cool. The shit's hitting the fan. Interesting. How could I thrive in this certain environment? Given the current circumstances, where's the opportunity? Or say it a little differently in terms of vision, how come it was so easy for me to thrive during the current economic political environment?
What if we are not talking about just the current situation, current environment, but the potential situation 10 years, 20, 30 years down the road that
Yeah.
is inevitably coming. The world is changing, and I
So
want
the
I want to
question
know
is,
about it.
given that the world is changing, what's the easiest way for me to thrive in this situation? Because anything else is like, oh, let me look at the problem. I'm gonna keep myself safe by staring at the oak trees on the side of the road. Like, you better stop that, you know? Like if you were a golf pro, you're an amazing golfer. We're golfing together, right? And you notice, like Steve, man, the dude has a beautiful swing. Hits the ball like freaking straight as an arrow, 350 yards, right into the sand trap every single time. One day you're like, okay, this is kind of an embarrassing question, but so when you're lining up to hit the golf ball, you're looking at the tee and the green, aren't you? I'm like, no, man, I'm super scared that I might go on the sand trap, so I got my eye on that sand trap. Okay, well, there's your problem. So it's not that I don't want to even know that the sand trap's there. Like, noted, sand trap. Where are we going? Right? Like, I used to do a lot of mountain biking. Right? It's like, okay, I'm about to ride up this pretty steep hill. Now, look what are the obstacles? I'm like, okay, if I hit that rock, I'm stuck. I won't be able to ride over it. Do I stare at the rock and go, noted? Huh. This is where I gotta go. I'm not looking at the rock ever again. I know it's there, but I know that to get past it, I have to be super focused on the plan.
Another example might be, I know you don't have a driving license yet, do you?
I do, but I don't use it.
Okay, so you've done your driving test then. So when you're doing your driving lessons, they teach you that if something's happening on the road, there's a hazard, they teach you not to look at the hazard, the tree that you're about to hit. They teach you to look at the space around the tree so that you'll drive around it. When I was doing my bike lessons doing the figure of eight, I found it really hard to keep the bike upright because I was looking at the floor instead of looking at where I wanted to go. So once I got taught to keep my head up and look at where I want to go, the bike would upright and it would go in the right place and I had more stability instead of looking at what I'm avoiding, which was losing my balance and hitting the floor.
Okay.
Here's a bike riding example. So I used to, when I was in college, the cycling team was very big. We were like, it was champions 2 years in a row, the whole country. But if you have a lot of cyclists riding there all in a row, all aerodynamic, right? You need to know if there's any cars coming, right? But you have to develop the skill set that you can check for the car without going. That makes sense. So I need to check for the car, but I need to still keep going where like I better like boom, it's got to be fast. It's like okay, there's the problem. Where are we going? Right? If I can't do that, then no one wants to ride with me. They're like, yeah, Steve, that dude, he's super sketchy. Why? Because I'm gonna run into the other person and we'll like everybody's going now.
Or if riding down the bike lane and you look to one side and see a car, you go, okay, the car's there. You don't keep staring at the car like pedaling away, go through a red light because you're too busy looking at the car that's behind you.
Okay, so going back to this worldwide situation, craziness and tyranny, example of CBDCs. So I watched the news about CBDCs coming inevitably. So instead of focusing on this problem, they focus where I can move my money. Could be
Sure.
cryptocurrency, could be gold, could be real
What is
estate.
CBDC anyways?
Go back to digital currency. We'll tell you about that later because it's a bit off topic. But
So
Yeah, so you go, interesting. Where's the opportunity?
being aware of issues and immediately thinking what's good in the situation, what's the opportunity, what I can
Yeah.
do, who can help me.
yeah,
I think, personally, one thing to keep in mind is anything you watch on the news, you go, why of everything that could be on the news, why do those people want me to know that?
I mean, I'm not talking about news example. I'm talking about
Yeah,
information that we get from
I get it.
independent sources which tell the real truth, not the news.
Sure. So that's what you have to ask is like, okay, given that, is there opportunity?
or what's your plan to not be affected by that and go work on that rather than just staring at the problem because it makes
Yeah.
you feel bad. Like that's one of my motivations is okay, that's what I'm trying to get away from. What do I want? Stephen's been teaching me a lot about vision, and that's what we've been talking about a little bit today. It's like, okay, that's what I want. There's another thing that I definitely don't want, but staring at what I don't want is like staring at the sand trap in the golf course instead of aiming for what you do want, which is the hole
Mhm.
in the golf course. So you need to know that that thing's happening, but don't just stare at it and worry about it. Go and do something positive that will like get you away from that or take an opportunity that's coming from that. Like, I don't know, start cryptocurrency. Hey, but
But on and away from motivation, isn't that kind of trying to run away and then it's maybe the bad, like the not the correct energy.
well, I didn't.
CBDC is going to happen anyways, which is highly likely. So isn't that okay? Face it and just say, okay, this seems like it's going to happen anyway, because there's a worldwide effort that all the banks are trying to implement this. Where is the opportunity?
Yeah, that's kind of what Stephen's saying.
So
The opportunity might not be with that. It's just what are you going to focus on? That's your opportunity rather than focusing
Yeah.
on the negatives.
Should be removed from it completely, or could be in it as well. I mean, it's again asking questions and trying to figure out, okay, is there anything here for me or is there nothing here for me? Is there anything away from this? Or is there nothing here away from this? Maybe. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
yeah. So let's focus. So if we go back to the 4 steps of flow, the selflessness, the ego, timelessness. Another great example of timelessness is years ago, I heard a man talking and he goes, I am a coach for high net worth families. Because when I start working with them, one of the first things I do is I try to convince them to take a week's vacation every 6 weeks. Because initially these people think I'm crazy. What do you mean? I have to, I must, I should. He goes, just try it, right? Typically they'll come back from vacation. They'll be like, yeah, so there was in Aruba, minding my own business, walking on the beach. All of a sudden, bing, I just got an idea. I just made $30 million off that idea. I think I'll do this vacation thing more often, right?
Oh,
Is because I'm stepping out of the It's like you're not powerful that way.
well, then what people do on vacation, they're not really on a vacation. Sometimes it happens like, so I'm at this new place, so I absolutely must explore everything that
Yeah.
is here because who knows when I'm back. instead of just going like, oh,
I
maybe I
can't
think
relax. Yeah.
3 things that I want to do in these 2 weeks. And then the rest, I'm just gonna let it flow and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then something interesting come into your life that way.
So here's the third one is super interesting. So selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness. Okay. With effortlessness, typically what people do is when they get frustrated, it's all about how you interpret frustration. What do I mean? Most people, when they're frustrated, they take frustration to mean, oh, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to do this. Maybe it's not going to turn out. But you should probably just move forward with the same mindset and approach because you don't want to be a quitter. See?
Okay, so they make it mean what again?
So that, oh, I'm super frustrated. Well, oh, that feeling of frustration, what does it mean? Oh, it means maybe this is not going to turn out. Maybe I don't have what it takes to do it. It looks like it's going to be hard. Well, what's your plan? Well, I mean, I'm not a quitter, so keep moving forward with the same mindset and same approach. Oh, I'm frustrated. Yeah, well, keep going. In what? In frustration. I go, okay. So maybe what frustration means, it's like the GPS on your phone when you're driving somewhere and it's blinking, telling you, hey, make a legal U-turn. Why? Because you missed the easy road. You missed it. This road's gonna be hard. So you should turn around. Turn around, you missed the easy road, right? So if you have a fundamental belief that it could be easy, then when things are frustrating, you go, huh, what did I miss? Like, how do we get back to being easy? How could it be easy? It's hard. Well, okay, but could it be easy? And your brain goes, let me check into that for you. Like, oh, how about this? You're like, oh my God, there's the easy way, right? So again, that's why we go back in the vision. Why do we keep prompting you to ask, how come it was so easy? How come it was so easy? How come it was so easy, right? Because of all the many ways we can accomplish things, some are the difficult way, some are the easy way. If you don't think there is an easy way, you won't look for it, and if it shows up, you won't even see or acknowledge it. Right. And the degree to which your brain will filter out information based on your subconscious beliefs is freaky weird. Okay, let me explain this to you. It's like, so to survive in life, your brain takes on so much information that it's got to filter information out. So the information comes in, your brain compares it against your subconscious beliefs. Life is, I am, people are. Okay. And if the information does not match your beliefs, your brain will tend to ignore it or pervert the information to match it.
So if the information doesn't match your belief,
I have MS, it's not curable.
okay.
You're like, hey, I have something that might make you feel better. Like you didn't even hear it. Does that make sense? Right. So if we're talking about business, there was a super interesting study done. And by the way, there's certain people whose brain does not make that shortcut. And they have some super weird problems. Like if your guys' brain didn't make that shortcut in general, and last night before bed I shaved my beard off, literally you would show up today and go, where's Steve? Like, and that sounds funny because your brain makes shortcuts. You'd be like, oh my God, you shaved your beard. But there's people in the world, their spouse gets a haircut without telling them, they're freaks. Who are you? That sounds weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
It's bizarre. So here's a business example. Okay. So researchers asked for two sets of people. They said, we want people who think that they're lucky and other people who think that they're unlucky. So I got these two groups of people. They gave them all the same test to do. They're like, hey, Adam, here's a newspaper. The only thing you need to do to be a study participant is look through the newspaper and count how many pictures are in the newspaper. Okay. Now, what the study participants didn't know is that the researchers had put 2 written items into the newspaper extra. One of them said, there's 43 pictures, you can stop counting now. The other one says, congratulations, you have won $250. Only the people who thought they were lucky could see either one of those. Weird. Oh, everything's going down because of blah, blah, blah. Because central banking digital currency, we're screwed. If there's a way to have an amazing life in the middle of it, you'd be like, didn't even see it.
Yeah.
See the problem? The most interesting, I had 2 experiences that kind of related how fragile my version of reality is. Okay. One of them was with my sister. And my oldest sister had had a tough marriage, a lot of guilt and shame, got divorced, moved to Hawaii. In Hawaii, she dealt with quite a bit of depression. Okay. And one thing she believed is she didn't think that other people thought that she was worth investing in her relationship. You don't really like me that much to be friends with me, blah, 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 whatever. Right. So she leaves Hawaii. She comes and lives closer to me in Texas. And she starts coming to church with me. Okay. And in general, I'm not a very outgoing social person. Okay. My wife, though, she is. She likes connecting people. I'll meet this person. Here's my sister, whatever. So my sister met a bunch of people over a couple of weeks coming to church with us. One Sunday, after the service, I'm standing next to my sister, and 3 separate people walk up to her, and they all do the same thing. They acknowledge her, they affirm her, they invite her into deeper relationship. It's like, Mike, great to see you. You are just amazing. Dude, we should have a beer sometime, hang out. Something like that. 3 people, right in a row, 1, 2, 3, those 3 things. Okay. 30 minutes later, over lunch, my sister says this to me. You know, it's really hard to make connections with people at that church. Like, really? Like, I'm like you see this in business. Oh, network marketing is hard. No one wants to do network marketing. There's no opportunity. No one's interested. People think it's too expensive. I can't. No one wants to blah, 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 right? It's like, I looked at my sister, I go, and it took me a while. I'm like, your brain is lying to you. I'm telling you, that's not the truth. You've got to open yourself up to opportunity. Okay. Couple of months or maybe a couple of weeks later, she's walking her dog in the state park near her house on a Tuesday. And she meets some other women who are also walking their dogs on that Tuesday. And these women invite her into a relationship. This time she sees it and she accepts it. Okay. And these women have been walking their dogs every Tuesday, every Thursday in a small town in Texas for the last 20 years. And they know everybody. And all of a sudden, my sister is like, click. Does that make sense? By Christmas that year, at her holiday party, she threw a holiday party. I went to it. Her house was full of people who loved her. Right? It was like, there's opportunity everywhere. Oh, I'm so stressed. They're like, just keep walking past. It's like, it's opportunity. It's like, hello, hello. You're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I don't know how I'm going to survive. It's like, you didn't see that? No, didn't see that. Right. The personal experience I had, to the degree to which your brain will pervert reality, it was, I was in a hotel conference room, classroom training. It was like rows of chairs. That makes sense. You go in there, you sit down, they present it, you do your real training. And this woman walks in and she sits in the row in front of me, about 3 seats to my right. I just glance at her and I notice her, she's a very pretty lady. She has a short, dark haircut. It's warm out. She's wearing kind of a spaghetti strap summer dress, and you can see her back. But on her back, I noticed that she has a gray surgery scar, like about the width of my thumb, running down her back. Like you look at that, you're like, holy shit! Like, would they like fuse her entire spine? And what happened to her? She's in pain, and you're like, I mean, I didn't stare at her because that's weird. That's rude, right? And about 45 minutes later, I looked back, and guess what? She had no scar.
Let's go.
I somehow lighting something, my brain made that up. I would have perjured myself in court about it. And I would have been complete bullshit because it actually never happened. Interesting. Like I had that experience. I'm like, holy crap. Like, what do I think that is like is a lie?
Why did you? I mean, I understand the concept you're talking about. I'm just curious why your brain made up the scar.
I have no
What
idea.
belief were you holding that?
It may be not a belief, maybe just like, oh, I like you glance at something and you see a shadow and your brain's like, it was a scar.
Okay, yeah.
Because it just shortcutted it. Does that make sense? Oh, this person didn't like me. Person's like, like my son. So I'm in church one day. Well, what happened is this young man in church goes to my son. He goes, I think your dad hates me. Because I think your dad hates me. My son laughed at me. Oh, he does not hate you. He goes, go up to him and talk to him about jujitsu. And Marie sits there, and this young, random, nice young man who I never really knows before comes up to me and starts, oh, do you do jujitsu? I go, yeah, we do jujitsu. We had a very nice conversation about jujitsu. I'm like, never even noticed the kid before.
So not only did you not hate him, you didn't even
Like-
recognize that.
I mean, like, acknowledge his existence barely. I'm like, I think I saw that kid before. Not like staring at him like, I hate your guts. You know, like he made it all up, right? Oh, I don't think the interview went well, or man, I don't think this people are not going to be interested in business. I'll tell you that for sure. Really? Oh, really?
You know,
Yeah.
I catch myself at work oftentimes. I work in a law corporation, so many people are oftentimes stressed out and very serious. And there are certain people that whenever I see them or walk past in the corridor, and there's one specific lady. It's always like that. I never seen her smiling. And one time we're in the same lift. We work on the same floor. We're getting off the same lift, and there's a door. She was walking in front of me, so she got to the door first. She opened the door for me, look at me, and smile. And yeah, I thank her. It's the first time I saw her smiling. Not only that, she even opened the door for me. So it was, I had some, I don't know, story or image of this woman, who she is, why she may not like me for some unknown reason, even though I
make it
don't
all
talk
up.
to her. I made it all up.
I'll tell you a crazy story. The guy who wrote the book, The Happiness Advantage, which is a phenomenal book, he's a Harvard professor, and in it they go over all the clinical research, all the simple steps on how to make your brain happy. Because when your brain's happy, you have an advantage, the happiness advantage. Here's how to do it, right? So he gets big time consulting fees right now to go into corporations and change the environment in the corporation, right? So he gets hired by this hospital group to improve happiness of the people who work there, because they're like, we think if our employees are happier, they'll change the environment, and we think then the patients who are here will then be more likely to recommend us to their friends. Like, oh, you should go get your hair replaced at blah 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 hospital. They were great. You're like, oh, I think I'll do that, right? It's good for business, right? So he goes, okay, he got all the employees together and like, here's the new policy. Okay. If you're a certain distance away from them, you smile at everyone. You're a certain distance away. If they're fairly close, you say hi. 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 Right? That's it. And all the doctors thought, oh, this is bullshit. We have like, I'm not gonna do this stupid stuff, right? But this employees were like, okay. it fundamentally changed the hospital and they started making a lot more money. I'm like, huh? Right. You know, and that was like my problem is like I like that young man was like, I don't smile enough, so people think, oh, you're scary, you're intimidating, you're mean, you're well, like I'm not. I'm thinking about something, analyze it, like.
Yeah.
But is their misinterpretation of it not accurate? But I mean, on my part, I need to smile more. There's these. It's interesting when you smile. There's these muscles, right, beside your eyes. I think there's those like clotic muscles. I don't know what the name is. Babies genetically are trained to look for that because they feel you're a trustworthy person.
Yeah.
Smile quick. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, that's why we got the little wrinkles right there because your muscles go quick. You're like, oh, I like this person instantly, you know.
Smile when you're networking. So going back to the story you had of that lady that you weren't sure liked you or you thought didn't like you, and you essentially made up a story about it, right? Your brain started convincing you of something that you didn't know for a fact. And I've been practicing the mantra of I'm gonna go find out. So like that person's still not bought the product off me, even though they said they wanted it. They probably aren't interested. But I'm gonna call them and find out. You know, I'm not going to take my imaginary story about them not wanting it as truth because I made that up. So I'm going to call them and find out, hey, do you still want this? They go, yes or no. So at least I now know I didn't just make it up. Like, oh, you're looking for your phone book and you're like, oh, that person probably won't be interested. But I'm going to find out. I'm going to call them anyway and ask her because I don't know. It's bullshit that you tell yourself that they won't be interested. Just find out. Just give them a ring and go, hey, I thought I'd show you this. I have no idea whether you're interested or not. I told myself, don't literally say this, but I told myself you wouldn't be, but I'm ringing to find out. You know? Or that person over there has a very successful business, would be interested in this for one moment, but I'm going to find out because I don't know that's true. You know, like just don't make up stories. Catch yourself going,
Yeah.
oh, I have this thought, this opinion, but I don't know it's true. So I'm going to go and find out. It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. I've used it with my entire phone book, to be honest. I've gone through my entire phone book going, oh, this person probably won't be interested because, but I'm going to go and find out. I'm going to call it.
That's great. Let's find out for sure.
Yeah, let's prove it.
I'll give you an amazing example. So I was with this company called Max International, and I was with my upline. We were in Louisiana, like Shreveport, Louisiana, or somewhere. So my upline's name is Carl, and we're hanging out with a guy named Stuart. And my upline's like, Steve, do you know Stuart is worth $50 million? I'm like, damn, like Stuart, good job, right? But I'm like, I talked to Stuart. I'm like, Stuart, I got a question for you. Why do you like doing network marketing? I mean, he doesn't need to do like people like, oh, that person's rich. They don't need more. He's they're not interested. Blah blah blah. Right? He goes, Stuart, why would you do network marketing? He looked at me like I was an idiot. He goes, low initial investment, no overhead, no employees, great tax benefits, high upside potential. What's not to love? I'm like, no. That's why you're worth $50 million because you're like, like,
Yeah.
makes sense. So, selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, right? Oh, I'm so frustrated. You're not going to get to where you want to go if you just operate in frustration. You're like, how can we make it easier? How can it flow? Why? Oh, you want the richness? You want the amazing stuff? Like really, really amazing? You better get really good at the effortlessness part because that's when the richness. So effortlessness, then richness. Right? You're like, I'm so frustrated. I'm working so hard. I'm gonna get there. It's like, meh. You can't create really extraordinary things just operating in frustration and striving, right? Because you're not doing it right. So it's like, so I would spend a decent amount of time just walking around saying to myself, easier and more abundant, and easier and more abundant. And the easier it is, the more abundant it is, and easier and more abundant. And the degree to which that's been true in my life has been shocking. It's like my income going up and up and up and up, and me working kind of easier and easier and easier and easier. It's almost like how hard I'm working, how much money I'm making. But here's this is the reality of it though, is that's not your default to do that. It's not your default to be in flow. Your default is the exact opposite. So where's the hard work come in? To get into flow.
It's a big question, how to get
That's
flow.
so it's like if you know what it looks and feels like, then you go, and when you recognize how I'm feeling, I'm like, wait, I'm not feeling in flow. Okay, note it. Let's refocus.
So, Stephen, how would you define abundance in many different ways? Because I'm Hungarian and I don't feel like I have like the right translation for this word.
So sure. But it's enough for you and the ability to be generous.
More than you need.
Abundance of energy. Oh, I have enough to do all my stuff. Oh, you need some help moving? Yeah, I'll come over, help you carry all our furniture up and down the steps. Whatever. Like, oh, I'll come over. We'll help you do this because I know you broke your ankle. We got that for you. Or I have an abundance of time and money and health, right? And knowledge and love and compassion and whatever. So it's enough to be generous, right?
Would you say it's being in a situation of having excess of what you need? Excess of time,
Yeah.
too much money, too many
I
friends.
mean, too much is like it's weird
More
word.
than I need, or
More than I need. Extra.
overflow.
Right. An example might be having an abundance of leads means that I've got all the ones I want to handle plus more to give to my downline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
Like I have an abundance of leads. I have an abundance of people interested. Why? So I can give I have people in Australia asking me, oh, I want to sign up. I'm like, cool. I don't even need you here. Rebecca meet Susie. Rebecca can take care of you. Right. I'm like, I know that there's certain posts that I remembered. Oh yeah. There's people on some posts that I did on January 23rd who went back and commented on that and they go, I want to do the business. I'm like, I keep on forgetting to get back with them. Right. So the amount of people are like, yes, interested, more information, please. Like I almost can't keep up. Does that make sense? That's why I have to use my thumb. Copy paste like that. It's like I gotta get all information there, right? So it's like if I have an abundance of time, I go, oh, well, I was like, we should do something like, okay, I'll take the day off.
Utah has abundance of great coffee to drink every day. You have
Yeah.
much more than you can ever drink in one day.
like another example,
Nice.
like a farmer growing wheat will have an abundance of hay, as long as it's a good year. Otherwise, he might not have an abundance of it. But if it's a good year, he's got an abundance of it. He's got more than enough. It's like I've sold all my crops, made all the money for the year, and I've got some left over. That's abundance.
Is
I will-
abundance also depending on mindset, how you look at it,
Sure.
or how you
Abundance has to do with how well it can flow to you and through you. Right. So if it comes to me and I gotta go, I only do that because I don't think more will come. See, does that make sense? But if I'm like, I'll give some to you and some to you, why? Right. So I'll tell you the weird. So like there's a certain, we talk about a vision and a feeling. And so can I get in alignment with a certain feeling that represents what I want in my life? Follow me so far? So weirdly, lately, when you ask, well, what are you meditating on? Like abundance wise, right? And this may seem weird, but you ever see the weathermen newscasters? They're like, oh, we're here from the hurricane and it's blowing, and there's like they're reporting. Does that make sense? Like, you know, So I've been working on meditating a bit. Like imagine that there's so much blowing at you, like you're standing here kind of like braced, and you kind of have to turn your head a bit because you can't really breathe well if it's like you're like that makes sense. So I'm playing around with that. Like, could there be so much abundance that it's almost like that? Does that make sense? You're like, oh my goodness, whoa, what like you know, because you understand there's too little money problems and there's too much money problems.
Yeah, too much money.
So that would be example of too
Yeah.
much money balance.
Like too much, like I can't just let it sit in my bank account. I'm like, I gotta better do something with that. That makes sense. Like, oh, yeah, you better like figure out where you're gonna invest it. You better maybe create different task structures, trusts, different corporations to create layers of protection. You know, is this like you have new problems? That makes sense. You're like, oh man, you better like,
So, Matt, to distinguish between abundance and abundance mindset, a person with a massive stream of income coming in who has an abundance of money without the abundance mindset hoard it all because they're afraid it will disappear. There's no abundance mindset. So they would just hoard it and keep all that money instead of spending it. If they got an abundance mindset, they would spend it knowing or believing that more will just keep coming because they got an abundance mindset and an abundance. Somebody with an abundance mindset without the money flowing in still has the belief that it's coming. Right, so you can have an abundance mindset without the abundance. I wouldn't go too crazy. I had a friend once that had an abundance mindset with money and basically started giving away money to every homeless person he passed. But this was a £20 note every time. I very quickly ran out of money trying to do the abundance mindset. And then it was like, oh wait, I'm not abundant yet. But I have the mindset. So it was transitioning or trying on that abundance mindset. I went a bit too far with it. But that's the distinction between abundance mindset that everybody talks about. It's like it's good to believe that I have an endless supply of leads that